Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever applies to you. Welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Julia. I'm a contemporary singing specialist based in Australia, and today the spooky season is finally upon us. I don't know how you guys feel about Halloween, but it has arrived. The polls have gone out. You guys have told me via those polls which artists and songs you would like me to react to for a very special Halloween themed reaction. Now, the results are in, and we did have a clear winner in this year's Halloween poll. However, before we can proceed, I don't know if regular old video Julia is really fitting the vibe for a spooky Halloween reaction, so I think we might need to change this up a little bit. Why is there always blood on my teeth? Rather pointed. Stabby, aren't they? Good evening. Welcome. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm Vampire Julia, and today is the Halloween reaction, which won the Halloween poll, so we are going to be reacting to Scaretale by Nightwish, and if I'm correct, I believe we've never reacted to Annette as the lead singer for Nightwish before on this channel, so I suppose we best get on with it. Okay, I love it already. Most effective way to creep people out. Have something that sounds like a nursery rhyme, and I do believe we had Ring a Ring a Rosie or Ring Around a Rosie or Ring a Ring a Roses, whichever title you prefer. What a throwback, am I right? Anyway, so start off with something vaguely nurse rhymey sounding, have a childlike voice. In this case, it sounded a little bit more like an older child, so maybe somebody going into their teens. You combine that with something that has a high timbre that's like bends those microtones just slightly, so something like a music box or a toy piano or even a glockenspiel at times. You combine that childlike singing of a nursery rhyme with that kind of timbre, you'll have no issues scaring anybody. We're gonna keep going. Strings. Yes. So I love the contrast between when it was accented and when suddenly the other instruments, such as guitars, started to pick up the speed of what they were playing at. This kind of tension building can be really, really effective. And I must confess, I have heard these kind of arrangement choices in previous Nightwish songs that we've reacted to on this channel. But nevertheless, it's still highly effective and very enjoyable, especially when it feels like we're building towards something epic. Oh, and the choir. The choir helps too. Timpani. Oh, right. So we've got some really lovely layering happening at the end there with some of those backing vocals on the tick tock, tick tock. But something I do want to point out from her, and bear in mind, I've never heard Annette sing before, so I didn't quite know what to anticipate with what she would choose to do vocally or even what her timbre would be like. And I find it rather unique that she decided to start with something that's a little bit more nasalized in placement. And as the phrase continues on, we wind up falling into something that sounds closer to a growl. In fact, it is a growl. We've got a little bit of a blues contemporary growl happening towards the end there. Anyway, so the way in which these sounds are made, the nasalized placement requires the soft palate or the velum to be in a relaxed position. So it's not raised, it's relaxed, it sits down. The soft palate, if you aren't aware of where it is, if you stick your tongue to the top of your mouth, you'll feel the hard palate. And if you track your tongue all the way back, you'll start to feel something that's soft and squishy. And this is the start of your soft palate. Now that soft palate at the back, which is what the uvula hangs from, the uvula is an easy way to identify if it's raising and lowering, because it's easy to see that if you were to open your mouth rather wide and look in a mirror. But the velum itself is able to move, and when it's in a relaxed position, that is how we get this sound. So when she's starting her phrases and we get this little bit more of that tonality through her sound, it's because the sound is able to propagate up past the oropharynx through the nasopharynx, the cavity of the nasal passage, I guess. It's propagating up through there as opposed to dominantly through the mouth. So we get a slightly different tonality. And then throughout the phrase, she starts to lean more towards something that propagates a little bit more through the oropharynx, but not quite as nasalized. But as we get towards the end of this sound, we have a little bit more of some compression happening in the pharynx combined with a little bit of that blues growl. Now, there have been some studies done on how that growl is produced, and the closest that we have been able to observe thus far is this concept of the epiglottic fold, which is the flap that stops food and water going down your throat, of it curving over and vibrating against the arytenoid cartilages. If you did happen to watch a video, Julia's reaction to Spirit Box, you would know where those arytenoid cartilages are. They are the area where the vocalis muscle is attached at the back. So you've got the thyroid at the front and the arytenoid at the back, and those little bits of cartilages are what is being suggested as where that epiglottic fold is vibrating against. So we are going to continue exploring, but right from the beginning, and bear in mind, I've never heard Annette before, but the choices that she's making lend themselves quite well to being able to engage in some storytelling. So I'm very much looking forward to being able to see what else she comes up with. That was really cool. Oh, it sounds like she's going to keep doing that again. But let's re-listen to this. So her approach has actually changed a little bit between the first bit that we've listened to this next part that we're listening to now. She's a little bit more on the twangy side as opposed to the nasalized side. And sometimes people can get a little bit confused with this. Isn't twang and nasality exactly the same? Actually, no. So nasality will create what's more of a dull timbre quality, whereas twang gives us that bright, forward, pingy, ringy quality to our sound. Anyway, as I say that, that progression that she was moving into is starting to sound very much through here. And I'm very excited to see how far she takes that. So I want to re-listen to that section. Let's keep going. Oh, yes. So that did go where I thought it was going to go, which is all the way through here. So we get something that sounds a little bit more evil. Anyway, so sound is coming even more forward. Yeah! We have this quality in the sound. Let's listen to that again, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Whee! Whee! Let's try it all together. Imagine it going through your nose. You're being awfully nasalized in this sound. We're going to go whingy! And now you know exactly how to creep out children on Halloween. You're welcome. So really cool speech-like approach from Marco there. And the sounds that he's getting are the complete opposite to what Annette has just done. Annette is giving us these dull, sharp, pointy tones that are coming through the nose, while Marco is giving us a slightly wider pharynx. There's a lot more warmth and depth to his tone. So let's listen to that again, because I do like that contrast and loving the reintroduction of those high, tinkly, creepy instrument sounds. All right, let's listen to it again. Okay, so continuing off the back of that speech setup, we did wind up falling into something that was a little bit more melody driven. It wasn't exactly encompassing a huge amount of melodic spectrum as far as notes go. He wasn't going particularly high, but it was a perfect setup for what was going to happen in the music. It really does give us that circusy feeling as we wind up moving into the next transition within the music. There's a lot of storytelling here, and this next chapter makes me feel like we're at a circus, and it almost sounds manic in parts, not because of speed, but because those are the visuals that I get. So we're just going to continue going and see what happens here with the rest of Scaretale. Oh God. Little bit of interspersement there with the choir coming in. We had a little bit more of that soprano action coming over the top there. Of course, there are other elements of the choir that were present, but I do feel like having the sopranos coming over the top there really elevated almost like the creepy factor that's happening in the music at the moment. Perhaps it's just me. Perhaps I'm just overly sensitive to this idea of the circus and clowns not being particularly safe or noble characters. I mean, I did just finish cleaning the blood off my teeth, so perhaps I'm not a noble character either, but at least I'm not smiling when I don't want to be. Just saying. goodness. Manic laughter. So, as if the clowns weren't enough, we now have manic laughter. Fantastic. Before we continue letting them have their little moment, though, let's just discuss the contrast between Marco using that full fold, mass heavy sound contrasted to that second register choral sound. Yes, we have a little bit more to the choir there, and that second register is going to give us a slightly different timbre though. So we have Marco with his full fold contact. So if you watched my spirit box reaction, you would know now that vocal folds vibrate in a wave formation, and unfortunately in that video I did only show half of the wave. I should have started it at the top. So here we are, we're back, vocal folds. If you haven't watched that video, I definitely recommend going to watch that one, because video Julia spent a little bit of time explaining vocal fold vibration and wave formation, so that may be particularly helpful for you. We have the air blowing the bottom apart first, and then that same air kind of sucks it back together. It's called the Bernoulli effect, and you can Google that if you want. That's how the vocal folds continue that wave formation. But when we're discussing vibratory mechanisms, so you might have heard me refer to different registers as M1 or M2. This is talking about the vibratory mechanism. So we have this second vibratory mechanism that's coming from our choir with a soprano sound, of course. The soprano sound, which is hinting over the top, providing this beautiful contrast to the first register sound that Marco is creating. It's very unsettling, actually, having that contrast there, and I think that's why it's perfect for the music that's going on in the background, that really circus feeling. I mean, circuses should be enough to freak anybody out. I mean, I'm a vampire and I still wouldn't go. Anyway, so Marco is using mechanism 1, so that's full fold contact. So from bottom to top, that full fold is in contact with itself as it continues that wave formation. Whereas in our second register, it's just the top of the fold that's actually vibrating. So the bottom of the fold is not actually connected. And often this is the case because when you're up that high, the vocal folds are so thin that to get all of the folds in on the wave action would actually be a little bit more challenging because of how long and thin they are. Anyway, so loving the feeling that that contrast gives me. I think it's excellent, an excellent match rather, for the music that's going on underneath it. And then of course you have that just on the vocal level, that contrast there is something that's a little bit more sinister and low. And then you have so that second register stuff going, ah, ah, ah. So being able to move through those sounds, that second register tonality, beautiful contrast. I do think it's a little bit unsettling and disturbing to have a combination of all three, but that's just me. I love the horns going through that section. I feel like they're contributing a lot to the texture of the piece overall. So when we talk texture for voice, normally that means the timbre, because sometimes you do have voices rather, gosh fangs, voices which have a particular sound to them, a particular texture, some grit, some husk, some something in them, in which the easiest way to refer to them is a textured voice, sometimes in the same way that you would feel a different texture with your fingers. And then you have on the composition or general music theory where texture refers to the layers within the music. So those horns, I feel, are doing a fair bit actually in filling out the spectrum of sound and making it feel more cohesive. So let's go back and I want you to listen for the horns. They are contributing a lot to the epic feel of this music. So let's go back and just have a little listen to that again. Goodness. Okay. Well, that certainly takes us to the end of that, doesn't it? I did like the different layers that they used within the composition that contributes to this feeling of unease. So the interaction of different kinds of timbres, such as that like music box, toy piano, glockenspiel type timbre in the beginning. Again, if you want to creep anybody out, take any kind of nursery rhyme, put a creaky door in the background, and you'll be fine. No one's going to come near your spooky house because it's terrifying. Anyway, voice-wise, we actually got a pretty good spectrum of sounds going on in this particular performance, if we include the choir, of course, because the choir presents a slightly different vocal vibratory pattern, that mechanism I was talking about earlier, by giving us that second register, so vibrating at the top of the fold as opposed to the whole fold. And again, if you're not sure what these movements are, you can go and watch my Spirit Box reaction, and that has a little bit more of an in-depth explanation, although do bear in mind I should have started it with the top and then the bottom blowing apart and then being sucked back together, whereas I started at the bottom like a fool. We got some second register stuff, or some mechanism 2 work coming from our choir, and then we had our first register work. And it would actually earn more on the side of our lead vocalist leaning more towards a characterized voice as opposed to something that's super sing-songy, as we might expect from other genres or even other songs within the Nightwish catalogue. And in Scaretale, I do think we favour more towards this character voice, where things are going to sit a little bit more nasalized and then perhaps a little bit more bright as we bring them forward. We actually had Marco and Annette singing towards the end there, and both of them were in that first mechanism, first register, mostly character approach, which we'd heard them use earlier within the song. And I thought this balanced out really nicely going into the end. And if I may, Caption Julia, could you please repeat where the lead lines integrated into the choral lines, because I thought that was epic. Please, anytime now. Yes, that exactly. I feel like this is one of the things that Nightwish in particular does very well, is how they coordinate the different layers that are part of their composition. And in this case, we have the 2 lead lines, which feed seamlessly into that fuller choral sound. And that gives us that direct contrast between a full sound to not much left at all by the end of the song. If any of you are familiar with my reactions, you know I bang on a lot about tension and release. And a lot of that happens within the layers. I mean, they have a full orchestra, and that's a lot of layers with which to potentially screw up your composition with, believe me. Oh, this was full when I started filming. Oh no. And yet, they managed to balance them so that when they choose to do something with accents, it actually feels like it's the right time, and it builds this anticipation for the next section. I think this is something very clever composition-wise that Nightwish does, and I haven't commented on it nearly as much as I probably should have in my other Nightwish reactions, is how they actually handle the layers and ensure that whatever musical idea they're using contributes towards the experience as... Oh, what was I saying? Maybe I'll remember if I get to the bottom of this class. Layers. I feel like they handle the layers very well within the Nightwish arrangements to ensure we still have that tension building, and then we do in fact get some release. As we moved into that clown circusy type vibe that was sort of where we could have potentially headed, and it felt like it was meant to be part of the song because of the integration of the clown-esque costumes, yes, in the video, but also because of the way that they decided to use their character voices. So it's I mean, you go one more step past that and you wind up with a witch cackle. Yes, I'm gonna make fun of you, Witch Julia. You sound like suck it. Anyway, so good variation between nasality and twang. In fact, if you want to play around with this yourself at home, this is a good way of starting to develop a mix. So if we're at home, we go na 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 na. That's a nasalized sound. If we were to go na 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 na, that is a twangy sound. Now let's take this up. Let's go to a B flat. Na 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 na. Nasalized sound. Na 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 na. Twangy sound. So nasalized is largely dull. Twangy is largely bright in timbre. And something that Annette did really, really well throughout all of the song parts that she actually participated in, I view this as more of a collaboration musical performance as opposed to Annette being the forefront soloist the entire time. Like, the music really held its own as being a primary focus and a primary driver of the storytelling in this particular song. But something Annette did really well, and I mentioned this in the beginning, was going from something that was highly nasalized in placement to something that was more twangy in placement, and then dropping down to the growl. So that's a little bit more about some of the vocal style and delivery choices that were made within this particular piece. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I thought it was actually really good. There were some really good spooky elements within this particular song that I thought were pretty effective. Anyways, if you did enjoy this reaction, please be sure to give it a like, click the subscribe button and the bell notification beside it for more just like this one. And I have heard that Video Julia likes to wish you well for your health and safety, and so I shall wish you the best with your health and safety also. Anyways, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this Halloween reaction. I'll see you next time. Oh goodness, how does Video Julia do this? I feel like I'm about to stab myself on the head. Whew. I mean, I'd file them down, but sometimes you just need effective weapons on your fingers. Is it ring-a-ring-a-rosy or is it ring-around-a-rosy? Oh, Jesus. Gosh. Am I going to have to Google this? These talons don't work well with Google. Ring-a-ring-a-rosy. I was right the first time. Ring around the rosy? No! This was full when I started filming. Oh no.